Hi, I'm Linda Mao, and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we visit the Modern and speak with curator Andrea Karnes about the exhibition Focus, RongRong&inri. Now for Art This Week. Hi, I'm Linda Mao, and I'm here at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth speaking with curator Andrea Karnes about the latest installment of the Modern's Focus series, Focus, RongRong&inri. Andrea, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
I want to start by saying what a pleasure it is to meet you. I'm such a huge fan of the Focus series.
Thank you.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the primary objectives of the Focus series and how you go about selecting artists for these exhibitions?
So the idea behind the Focus exhibitions is that we bring, this is generally speaking, we bring artists to this area, DFW, who have not been seen in this area before. So we're introducing new artists. We leave it open to any media and to all countries. So it's an international program. For example, the Focus exhibition that we have up now is RongRong&inri. This is their first, he's Chinese and she is Japanese. This is their first solo exhibition in the United States. So we like to do that kind of thing. The age of the artist doesn't matter, but it's more about their exposure and their presence in our area.
The artist that you have currently on exhibition is a husband and wife collaborative team.
Yes.
RongRong&inri, as you mentioned, Chinese and Japanese.
Yes.
You have the work divided into three sections by some of their major projects that they've worked on. In this room we have Li Lutun. Can you tell us a little bit about the concept of these photographs?
Sure. This series in this room is one of their first major series when they began to collaborate as a couple. So they met in 1999. They did not even speak the same language. Inri spoke Japanese and RongRong spoke Mandarin. So they communicated through imagery and through common characters between Japanese and Mandarin. So they had like a limited vocabulary together.
Yeah.
But Inri, over the course of the next year, learned to speak Mandarin, moved to Beijing with RongRong. So this is actually their 15-year anniversary as a couple and as a collaborative team. This is one of their first major series, and this was the neighborhood of their first home together. In Beijing at this time, the cleanup began to happen for the coming 2008 Olympics, even though this was 2002. So many neighborhoods were being demolished, just mowed down for new urban development, and their neighborhood was one of those neighborhoods. So their eviction notice is included in this series, as well as their home. On the day their home was demolished, they held a funeral for the neighborhood and for their home. And for example, here, yes, you see they made a lily garland over the door frame of their home. And they're just sitting here silently staring out into the camera while the construction workers below, the demo crew, are just doing their thing. So this happened to them over and over again because artists generally live in kind of lower economic neighborhoods. So this wasn't the first time it had happened to RongRong, but this was the first time that it happened to them as a couple, so they wanted to document it.
It's very interesting that you say how they were sitting there while the demolition crews were there. In that way, it's a little bit performative.
Yes.
And I think that we'll see as we move through the gallery how they've established their style as a collaborative team. In this series, we see a continuation of that exploration into self-portraiture in a way that seems very personal. Can you tell me a little bit about this series?
Sure. This series is called Shaoshangdi, and it's the neighborhood where they moved to after they were evicted and their other home was demolished. So what they decided to do is make one portrait annually of their family. So in this case, you see Inri is pregnant. They now have 3 sons, but this was her first pregnancy. And in this series, the two of them are in a mix of traditional Chinese and Japanese clothes and then modern clothing. Also, you see in the background, they place themselves in the exact same spot every year. So this is where they live, and it's on the grounds of their studio, which was designed by the very important Chinese artist Ai Weiwei. So I actually got to visit them here where they live now, and these are pomegranate trees that kind of surround their doorway. And now you can see as the progression of these images goes on that how the front of their home has changed as well as how they've changed. So there are 14 works in this series. There'll be another one in 2015 that they have not yet made, and they'll make one each year. So it shows, again, this, kind of the cycle of life, their relationship, their children being born, and then their children growing up. And I think it's important to say here that RongRong&inri use traditional black and white photography and traditional techniques. So these are gelatin silver prints that they hand tint. They're black and white.
And I actually also read that part of the way that they bonded over that period where they were not speaking the same language was over photographic process.
Definitely.
Can you speak a little bit about how you see that come out in this work?
Well, I think they go into the darkroom together every time they print a work, and they both have to come to agreement on it. Now they've spoken the same language for many, many years, but that initial common bond was through imagery. And when they decided to become a couple and become a collaborative team, they both sold all of their equipment to get money to buy one camera together, and then supplies, because it's very difficult for them to get negatives, photosensitive paper. They generally use 4x5 camera, or they use other negative sizes as well, but it's very difficult for them to find those. So this common bond of photography and of imagery brought them together. RongRong is actually colorblind, so his imagery before meeting Inri was always black and white. Inri's imagery was mixed between black and white and color, but mostly color in her career before she met RongRong. So what they do together is use the black and white print, and then Inri hand tints the print, so she adds the color.
In this gallery, we see images from the series Sumari Story. Will you tell me a little bit about that series?
Sure. So this Sumari Story is their current ongoing series, and these are large scale, again, black and white, gelatin silver print photographs. So RongRong&inri were invited to Sumari to do a residency just for a few weeks, but they fell in love with the area because it is rural Japan, and they wanted to go back with their 3 sons. They wanted to take their sons out of the cities that they live in, because they live between Beijing and right outside of Tokyo, and into the countryside to kind of get them unplugged and in tune with nature. And RongRong talked a lot about how he grew up in a rural area of China, and he was always sad that his children didn't get to experience that. So they brought their children with them. They made this series of photographs that really are more metaphoric, less about their lives and more about sort of the idea of survival in rough terrain, which doesn't necessarily reflect in this image. I mean, you see snow out of the window and trees in the background, but if you look at the other images, an unpopulated area where living is rough and it's not easy to get food or water or electricity. So they brought their children there to have a life experience, but they made the images really more as symbolic of sort of man's plight in nature. So the other thing they did with the series, not for every work, but for some of the works, including this one, and this might be something that is a subtlety you need to see in person, but they placed rice paper between the negative and the light and the photosensitive paper to give each image kind of a hazy feel, but also to bring it back to the land. In one of these images, RongRong and one of his sons is staring out over the rice paddy, sort of the sustenance of life. So the idea that the rice paper is actually also in each image is important to them.
That's very interesting. I think in a lot of these images we do see, again, the human figure, but it's, as you mentioned earlier, it's different in a rural setting. It's sort of juxtaposing the human against nature. And in many of these images, they appear in traditional clothing or even naked to, again, bring us back to the rural Japanese setting.
Sort of the fragility of life also. and the tenderness of family, a loving family.
These images are very tender and they seem very intimate. Finally, I just want to ask you a little bit about RongRong&inri's influence on contemporary Chinese photography through the Three Shadows Photography Art Center.
So RongRong&inri founded the Three Shadows Photography Art Center in 2007, and they represent several Chinese artists in Beijing in that compound designed by Ai Weiwei. And the way they fund the place is through sales of photographs. They have a commercial gallery, but all of the money from sales goes back into running Three Shadows. And Three Shadows has a residency program. They show international photographers and videographers. They have programs for children. RongRong&inri feel, to put it the way they did, that it's their way to give back to the world, is to keep that Three Shadows up and running. And they also talked about how there's a Chinese saying that basically means when two people or entities come together, it creates a third, like a shadow. And so that's why they named it Three Shadows. And they also joked, I asked Inri if she was worried about her three boys because they were so far from home, and her sister was caring for their children. And she said, yes, I'm very worried about the children, and RongRong is very worried about Three Shadows because it's like a fourth child to them.
Very much so.
It means a lot to them to keep it running, and it really does add to the discourse of photography in general and Chinese photography.
We want to thank Andrea for speaking with us. For more information on the exhibition, go to themodern.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your poem